Thank you very much. I'm moderating today's panel in my role as the chair of the Australian Critical Minerals R&D Hub Steering Committee. And as a bonus, I'm getting to indulge a little bit of my inner lab nerd. It's been a while since I've worked in the lab, but it's still an interest area for me and very much central to the work all of our agencies are doing in critical minerals. So as such, it's my pleasure to introduce our panel members today, each of them representing one of the partner agencies working in the hub. So Kristy Guerin is a geochemist at Geoscience Australia. Zsanett Pinter is a geologist and geochemist working in CSIRO's microbeam laboratory. And Nicole McNamara is the analytical team leader at Australia's Nuclear Science and Technology organisation, ANSTO. So for those who are not familiar with the Critical Minerals R&D Hub, it's hosted by CSIRO, and it brings together expertise from Australia's leading science agencies, ANSTO, Geoscience Australia, and the CSIRO. The hub was created to coordinate and align critical minerals research efforts in order to build Australian intellectual property, to progress international research and development collaboration, and to connect projects to technical and research expertise. The three agencies are working collaboratively to scale up and commercialise Australia's critical minerals potential, aligning R&D to priority technical challenges and to Australia's strategic priorities. The hub project teams, all represented here today, aim to address technical bottlenecks to unlock downstream value and to build sovereign capability across the critical minerals value chain. There are a number of cross-agency projects delivered through the hub, and a few are particularly relevant to our conversation today. Those are work on high-purity silica and quartz, on high-purity alumina, on the production of high-tech metals and materials, and a project on accelerating the development of Australia's rare earth resources. The hub also facilitates researcher connections, and most recently in June this year, they brought the research teams from all three agencies together at Geoscience Australia's offices in Canberra for 2 days of science discussions and ideation. Our conversation today was in part sparked by the discussion started there, which raised the criticality of high-purity analysis methods to support project progress and to validate research outcomes. And we thought it would be good today to share some of that conversation with you and how we think that's going to play into the opportunities for Australia in this space. So Kristy, to ground our understanding as we open this conversation, when we say high purity, what do we mean?
So that really depends on what material we're talking about, and it varies quite wildly. So for example, I'm working in high purity quartz, so that's 99.995% pure SiO2. And we actually start to measure high purity materials by Ns because it's too annoying to say. So 99.99 is 4 Ns. When we're looking at something like high purity alumina, it can get down to as much as 6 N purity. And at that point, we're starting to look at 1 part per million impurities in that material. And if you don't remember parts per million from your last chemistry class, basically 1 part per million is almost as if I ate 1 grain of white rice last night for dinner, and you're looking for that. So it's a really, really tiny amount that we're trying to measure in these materials.
And when does high purity analysis start to get hard? How many Ns are we talking? Where do the real technical challenges kick in?
So it pretty much gets harder the more Ns that you get.
And Zsanett, where does high purity materials come into your current work?
In my current work, I segue, rather say it in, with the rare earth investigations in the first place, and now we are more looking into the metallization project within the manufacturing group inside CSIRO. So they are establishing a new way to actually forming lithium metals, rare earth metals, and also some of the refractory metals all together. So more or less coming from the rare earth side, getting into the very, very high purity world all around.
And Nicole, where does it come into your work? You're working on these projects at ANSTO?
Yeah, so ANSTO is part of the hub in building a hot chlorination facility, and that will be used to purify materials. I, as an analytical chemist, need to then prove that purity. And so needing to be able to report down to those grains of rice in your body and even beyond.
And Kristy, if you can just share a little bit of how you're working in this space.
Yeah, so I'm working in a high purity silica project, which combines both high purity quartz, like Nicole's working on, but also metallurgical grade silica, which isn't quite as challenging to measure impurities in, as it's only about 99% pure.
Thank you. So 99% sounds like the starting point, and then we're building from there. So obviously, there's some technical challenges associated with this type of analytical work. Nicole, can you talk us through some of the ones you've identified and how you're addressing them?
Yeah, so look, with every 9, you get exponentially more difficult to understand and quantify exactly what's going on in that material that you're working with. I think one of the really important things is to understand that there is no one unicorn instrumentation for analytical chemistry that will give you all your answers for every type of sample. And so being able to understand what material you've got and what analyst needs you have to be able to know what instrumentation you can use is really key. It's really important to remember as well that if you're talking about purity, contamination can come from everywhere. And so that instrumentation needs to be quite dedicated to that one type of material as well to ensure that quality results.
Thank you. So basically, once you're chasing purity, everything else is a contaminant.
You could sneeze a few offices down and we'd have some issues.
And not every impurity is built the same. How do the specifications build into this?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting part because you have your general specifications of proving your 9s, but beyond that, that's your total impurities. For your saleable markets, you then also need to meet an even lower specification. So let's chop up that rice even smaller and find our parts per billion in some analytes. And often those are your really difficult to remove analytes as well, and your most contamination concern. Sodium is a key example. Touch something and you've moved sodium around. So sodium to remove completely to be able to get down to some requirements of 1 ppb is logistically crazy.
And Zsanett, I know that everything's a contaminant and it's really easy to add things into the process. That's something that the CSIRO have been working on in the microbeam lab. Can you tell us more?
Yes, in our case, our laboratory is well known that we are not just dealing all sorts of problematic samples, but samples that are reactive, samples that are vacuum sensitive, samples that react with everything. So all around, we build up a capability before even the critical mineral hub started, more or less having the insight that it's really going to come down in the pipeline to work on these type of situations. So we have an inert transfer system that your sample never going to see oxygen in our processing from the sample preparation down to the microscopes. So that's very much the most important thing when we are dealing with metallization projects, where one of the first questions is my process actually worked? Do I see actually metals? Or do I just see that very tiny layer of oxygen grown on your samples that you just grown at the end of the day? So in that sense, we can do everything under an inert atmosphere, either argon or nitrogen. So what we usually do, everything is nicely bagged, go to a glove box, everything we do sample prep-wise, mounting, polishing, we can transfer that sample as an inert transfer into a carbon coater or into an ion milling and into any of our SEMs and any of our microprobes. So not a single second is exposed to the air. That is actually our main contaminant in our process, which is very annoying.
And that kind of development of that capability has required you to work with the OEMs in a lot of places. I know that there's the new microprobe that's got a lot of customization specifically to address critical mineral challenges. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yes, so we just commissioned, finally, we can knock on wood, we just commissioned our critical mineral focused microprobe that we got a funding from the Science Infrastructure Endowment funding, which is a very unique microprobe. We are focusing on rare earth measurement, do it as quickly, as easy as possible, and is also coming together with a cathode luminescence system where we can actually see down to ppb levels. Unfortunately, as just Nicole said, not everything is on the market. Not all minerals are luminescent enough to produce the right signals. Some cases we can see down to ppb levels of europium, which is very interesting, but it's not the most useful tool in all sense.
So it sounds like you're really highlighting the point Nicole made earlier, that is, there's no one tool that's going to answer every question. And I think that probably talks to the power of collaboration, like the cross-agency collaboration we're seeing in the R&D hub. How do you see that collaboration and the collaborations you've been able to form over the last couple of years addressing some of these technical challenges? Kristy, maybe you want to start.
Yeah, I think it's been really amazing actually, because we can't be experts in everything. As a geologist, I don't have a lot of understanding about downstream processing and the sort of processing of ore, refining of ore that is really good to have your head around, and that's where it's been really nice to have great people at CSIRO and ANSTO that we can touch base on. We all have different areas of expertise, but we all have really similar challenges in our different projects, and we've been able to touch base and sort of talk to each other and bounce ideas off each other throughout the last couple of years, which has been really powerful, I think.
And Nicole, do you want to pick up on that? Like, one of the benefits for me of working with this panel over the last little week to shape up our conversation is recognizing how much fangirling is going on among this group. They're big advocates for each other's work, which is brilliant to see.
Yeah, fangirling aside, there's definitely a lot of that. The one of the key things as well, like I mentioned, you need those high-end instrumentation. They come with big dollar signs or consumable costs, and real technical expertise is required to get the best out of them. Now, you can't have that everywhere. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to be a kid in a toy shop and have all of the instruments myself, but it's just not possible. So being able to have streamlined access and understanding to different technologies available, and for those particular analytes that you might need for one stream or the other is really, really key. There's the idea of not reinventing the wheel. It's a cliche for a reason, but why should we spend time doing that when we've got each other that we can, and other people within this hub that can help provide information and expertise to get this really going, to really make sure that we can address these issues quickly.
And is there anywhere where you see the greatest need for cross-disciplinary collaboration?
Oh, I think it's useful across the board. Like Kristy said, you can't have, not one person can have all knowledge. I'm sorry if that breaks someone's bubble out there, but it's just fact. Not a single person will know everything. And being able to engage with like-minded people, I think also, particularly for this kind of work, a lot of the people involved in these projects would often be hidden in a back lab somewhere. They're sitting in their lab, they're doing their cool science, and it's awesome. And they don't get these opportunities really to speak out as loud and meet other people in this area. So having that collaboration to get those people out of the lab and cross-communicating is really, really key.
And I know when we were talking earlier, obviously when you're trying to measure things that are very low, one of the complications that comes up is the standard space. Is there collaboration that can help in that space, or is it a bit more of a research journey?
Hey, if you've got some good standards, let me know. That's kind of how it happens, really, yeah. So certified reference materials, anything you want to do, you need to validate all processes. High purity solids is what is your main product. Solid analysis is prone to homogeneity issues. You also need quite intense sample preparation. And so across that, you can always do all those contamination concerns and things like that. So to make sure that your processes are fit for purpose across the whole chain, you need some certified reference materials to then put through your process, which are as like your material as possible. Out there on the market, certified reference materials for the really high purity work don't exist in a easily accessible format, or sometimes at all, depending on the sample you've got. So if someone has some of those or knows how you can get them or get them made, cross-collaboration and discussion about that is really helpful.
And Zsanett, I think you've had some experience chasing that down.
Yes, and it's also the same problem. Different machines require different standards too. So we cannot just hand over all the same around, which is a really pain in the butt at the end of the day, because that would be the most useful for all of us. And most of the time, we actually relying on each other's numbers, because every single project requires their own workflow. And we have to go through several machines, as just Nicole said, to get one final answer at the end of the day. And that actually requires relying on each other and relying on our technique and the technique that's coming in or coming after us all together.
Thank you. So we're talking about sort of the high purity space, and this is going to be a field that I think is going to be increasingly of interest. There's probably going to be a lot of opportunities in this in the future, and I know we've got Next Gen program running at IMARC. Can you share a little bit about your own path into this world and any advice you have for the next generation of scientists? Zsanett, do you want to start?
Know your strengths. That's the most important one. When I was finishing my PhD, I was very much focused on this is the tiny project I am interested and I am doing, and then the next upcoming tiny project that I'm doing and interested, and really going down on the rabbit hole. And we had a nice similar panel meeting and discussion about where do you see your strengths, where do you see yourself going forward? And I was sitting there, I had no idea. I could not answer it because I never really think about it. I was always just chasing the next small project end of the day, which is very disappointing in that sense, but it's the most important thing that you know what you are working on and know yourself, what you are actually interested in it, and really go for it, more or less. Go and try everything. It might not everything gonna work out. I had a lot of closed doors in my ways, but you would not know which door is actually opening and which one gonna be your fit at the end of the day.
Nicole, do you want to share a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, so I don't think I had the conventional journey to where I am today, and so I'm proud to sit up here with some amazing doctors. But I think it's really important to stay curious. I think particularly in early opportunities, whether they being job opportunities, university, whatever stage that they're at, be curious. Ask questions. If there's ever a time that you're told what to do, always ask why. There's a reason behind that. There's context. Learning that context, no matter what it is, will make you do that step better. That also provides more information for the next steps. Goes into my next advice of always be willing to help. Because while you've got your task, someone else next to you will have a different one, and while you're helping them out, you'll be learning more yourself. Keeping that questioning attitude means that you can come, not that expertise in something, but the cross-broad knowledge, which before you know it, you'll have this knowledge bank built behind you just from your curiosity that will lead you into future things. It'll open maybe some of those closed doors or those narrowly open doors, but also just means that there isn't a set path. You don't have to go to PhD to become in science. Just stay curious. Ask why.
It's a great reflection, and I think it's great to reflect. There's just so many different ways to enter a science career, and that curiosity goes a long, long way. Kristy, what advice do you have? And I think also, I know you've talked a lot about, as a geoscientist, engaging with other parts of the value chain to inform your thinking, if you want to share on that.
Yeah, sure. So I think at the moment it's a really interesting time for geoscience because we're seeing a lot of university departments being cut back or shut down completely. We're seeing like a decrease in student enrollments. I think geology is not that much of a sexy job anymore, but it's really a shame because if we want to, meet the green energy transition and 2050 goals, then we need a lot more people that are really passionate about the environment and passionate about making positive change to get involved in earth sciences and sort of adjacent things like metallurgy and engineering. So it's a really interesting time for us when I think less people are getting into it, but actually we need more people to get into it, and we just need to be able to sell ourselves a little bit more. And I think that's something that maybe we don't do very well as scientists, is communicating our work and getting out there and selling all this really cool stuff that we're doing. I don't know about you guys, but when I was growing up, I never met a scientist, and I loved rocks, and I wanted to be a volcanologist. And my mum told me I couldn't because there's no volcanoes in Australia, which is a lie. There are. So I actually did a completely different career path. I had 10 years in a different career completely before I became a geologist, because I'd never met a scientist or a geologist before in my whole life, and I'd never heard anyone talk about what they do, and I didn't realise that I could do a job that's as cool as the one that I have now as a scientist. And I think it'd be really neat if we could see sort of an increase in our public engagement and getting people aware of what we're doing, especially given the current climate around mining and earth sciences.
As a geologist, that's music to my heart. I think we all enjoy and love the science we do, and I think that's a real opportunity of how we share that, but also how we frame it in the opportunities around the critical minerals conversation and the types of work that that's going to drive. So I know you're all, the analytical aspects of the project are not the only ones. Can you just share a little bit about who you're working with within the hub teams and the different skills coming together, that kind of multidisciplinary aspect? Nicole, you're at the end. I'll throw to you.
Yeah, so I'm really fortunate to have across, of course, these great hub connections, but also just within ANSTO Minerals itself, we have everything from process engineers, chemical engineers, meteorological staff members. We have the analytical team that is then there to support any of the research work that goes on. And I think it's, I really, truly value the ability to have that in-house knowledge. I think there's something to be able to know what you're doing is feeding into something else, and then the ability to really ensure that I think analytical chemists have done themselves a disservice. We might call ourselves, button pressers 101, but the expertise behind that is really important, and if it's an in-house knowledge that is held, you understand the impact of this, and that it's not just a sample on the bench, it's not just a number out the door. The implications of the work is quite vast and varied, and it's fantastic to have those conversations.
I think obviously when you're innovating, when people are trying new things, the timely provision of data to tell people whether they're on the right path or they need to make change, that partnership becomes really critical. Zsanett, I know you've referenced the work you're doing in metallization. That's taking you into working with people in the manufacturing space. Can you talk a little to that?
Yeah. They are quite interesting projects all around, not just because it's a whole new capability building that altogether CSIRO is very good in it and planning for the long term, and that's more or less also what the Critical Mineral Hub is doing altogether. Yeah, every single project is really as its own. You have to rethink everything. You have to set up a different workflow for every single problem just to be able to get to the right answers and not waste a lot of time going around using all of your machines because you can and because it's just here. Why not? But actually getting into a meaningful space with it. It's quite interesting because us in characterization, we are really working everyone within the mineral resources. So for myself, it's very interesting to see when it's a deposit discovered, when the first real characterization of it happening, that's how, not exactly the same deposit, but it's how actually transferred to the processing group, what are the steps that is actually the samples and the materials going through, how that gets treated, analyzed, what are the actual questions that needs to be tweaked and answered to get the right process in. And then that's, at the end of the day, it all goes down to the downstreaming situation when we are metallizing the very, very, very final product at the end of the day. So yeah, it's very nice to have the whole broad situation from the very beginning until the very end, just to see it and contribute it to.
I know there's a lot of learnings that come from materials analysis back into the analysis, like pure metals and other sort of manufactured materials back into understanding geoscience, and there's a lot of iteration between those worlds. Kristy, you talked a lot, you work in a geoscience organization, but you're passionate about that downstream connection. Do you want to just share your reflections there?
Yeah, I think I used to work in the mine waste space a little bit, and one thing that I learnt while I was doing that work was about how important it was to have a bit of a holistic approach to characterizing materials. So I think as geochemists, we're really used to putting a whole rock in some acid and dissolving it and finding out what's in it, which isn't actually particularly useful when you want to process that material. What we need to understand is the deportment, and that's really, really important when we start getting into critical minerals, because things aren't hosted in nice, beautiful minerals that we see all the time, like chalcopyrite. Things are hosted in really weird things that don't want to be dissolved properly when you put them through the processing chain. And it's something we don't do very well yet, and it's something that I'd really like to see us moving towards understanding better. We don't have a lot of metallurgy capability at Geoscience Australia, which is why it's really cool to have this sort of connection with CSIRO and ANSTO, because we can call up the metallurgists and be like, hey, here's what I think, what do you think? And we get a better understanding about the downstream process a little bit more. So I think really understanding the deportment of critical minerals is incredibly important, and we're starting to move into that area now, which is really exciting.
Thank you. And as I start to bring us to a close, I'd just love to hear from each of you, and I'll start with you, Kristy, about what you're most excited about in the future of this field of science.
All the machines, like just the technology. I guess if you look at where we were 10 years ago and where we are now, the speed at which technology is developing. I mean, we can already measure parts per billion. We can look at atoms on the atom probe. These are like really inaccessible techniques. Maybe like 20 years ago, everyone didn't have a laser, but now most people do. I mean, it's really exciting to see where we're going. These things are becoming more accessible to everyone, which is really nice. I think we'll see some cool science coming out of that.
Zsanett, I know you've got toys in the lab that used to be the domain of synchrotrons and others. What excites you?
Yes, so we just finished commissioning our new microprobe, which is mainly focusing on rare earth measurements, that we are very excited to actually put into test and use it in real projects, not just on our standards and playing around how to do the best setup altogether. What I am most interested in at this moment is we also have, with the same microprobe, a high-resolution cathode luminescence, where we can actually see down to parts per billions. Again, not all minerals, unfortunately, beautifully luminescent, but some are, which is very important for as a mineral indicator in different mining situations and different deposits altogether. So that's one of the main interests of mine. And as of Friday, when I was leaving to join here, the colleagues of mine just unboxed our very newest toy, which is going to be a soft X-ray detector focusing on iron L lines in 1 eV resolution. That means we can do, within our microprobe, iron speciation measurements, which is actually leading back to the big green material scheme that we are having, or program we are having inside CSIRO. That will be very exciting times. But we should also not forget, last year there was 40 new deposits, mineral deposits found here inside Australia. That's a huge number.
And lots to learn.
And lots to learn. We almost feels like we don't know enough.
Nicole, bring us home. Tell us what you're excited about.
Look, ditto to the high-end instrumentation and toys, like please. But beyond that, I think I'm really excited about Australia's position right now, and that we're getting, as a country and community and stakeholders, really great engagement and understanding, and further global support. I think we are really well positioned to take this industry know-how and knowledge, whether it between our agencies and others, and really help push Australia's future. We've got a great years ahead of us.
Thank you. That's a great note to end on. So I will thank our panel members today. We are, because we enjoy working with each other so much, we have a shared booth presence, all three agencies together, along with the R&D hub. So please come join us there. We are hosting some short science and innovation talks on the booth. And if you want to hear more from Kristy on high purity quartz, she'll be presenting tomorrow at 12:30. And there's a follow-up talk from one of our ANSTO colleagues at 12, I think it's 12:30 again as well, on the booth, talking about high purity silica. So please come find us and ask us more. Thank you.